From the Toronto Region Board of Trade, this is Toronto Talks. Toronto, let's talk about our waterfront. 10 kilometers of shoreline that will define how our city grows for the next century.
You know, the one thing that I think need to do is try to create connectivity between all of these different aspects of the 10-kilometer waterfront.
The vision has always been to make this a really special waterfront. And we have been looking at some of those other cities from around the world and said, this could be one of the greatest waterfronts.
Toronto's waterfront is one of the largest urban redevelopment opportunities in all of North America. Housing, jobs, culture, industry, all of it has a place here if we get the balance right. Two people at the heart of that work are Vic Gupta, CEO of CreateTO, and Chris Glaisek, Chief Planning and Design Officer at Waterfront Toronto. Together, Chris and Vic's organizations are working to transform Toronto from being a city on a lake to a waterfront city. Recently, they both sat down with our President and CEO Giles Gherson. Here's that conversation.
Great to have you here for our another episode of Toronto Talks. And what we'd love to sort of get a sense of, I think, is your visions of the waterfront. We're here to talk about what the waterfront is, what it can be, where it's going. We call it the last frontier for Toronto, because you think about a city of this size and scale and scope, and we've got this phenomenal opportunity that hardly any other city in the world would have of a relatively underdeveloped prime piece of real estate that's 10 kilometers long. And I think it'd be helpful to get a sense, Vic, of how you came to this job.
Yep.
And, a little bit of what CreateTO does. Because as I was saying earlier to you, when you hear CreateTO, you think entertainment rather than what you really do, right?
Sure.
Your involvement with the port and so on.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you. First of all, this is it's a real treat to have this conversation and talk to some of your members and listeners. So my background I've worked in and out of government for many years, supporting and working with the private sector to help government understand their business, and then working inside the government. And in 2017, under the leadership of Mayor Tory, the city had decided that real estate needed to be consolidated, and that we needed a strategic real estate advisor. Prior to that, real estate was really just the dirt that something sat on.
Very disjointed, right?
Very disjointed, distributed decision-making, et cetera. So that started the creation of CreateTO. My background, in addition to government, has been as an entrepreneur. I've had a couple of different businesses. And so there was an opportunity to join CreateTO. I feel a passion for public service, opportunity to make the city better. And a matter of time, I had the opportunity to become the CEO. CreateTO, really the mandate is to optimize the use of city-owned real estate. So we, on behalf of the city, we don't own much of the real estate directly, but we advise the city on how, to create co-location opportunities, how to maximize the value, how to, build more affordable housing as sort of priority number one. And then we support the city's divisions as they need more real estate solutions. So how do we co-locate, recreation centers with libraries? And I think lastly, and sort of really pertinent to this conversation, is on behalf of the city, we own in title about 400 acres of the land that is in the Portlands. And that brings, Chris and I and his organization and my organization very closely linked as partners in trying to develop the Portlands and the waterfront.
Terrific. And trying the right mix as well, because, one thing we want to talk about at some point in the conversation is the port itself. Where you have a role.
Absolutely.
And whether the port, it's a huge economic asset. I think there's a sense it could do more, but we'll come back to that because it'll play a role, I think, in the general scheme of things. Chris.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Giles, and great to be here with you, Vic. A little bit about myself. I'm actually trained as an architect, but I've worked as a planner for most of my career. Before I came to Toronto, I was actually part of the core planning team that was planning the rebuild of the World Trade Center site. I was hired on to do that right after 9/11 happened, and worked on the design competition that led to the ultimate selection of the Daniel Libeson scheme as the master plan. And that was a very interesting, very fraught, very high profile endeavor with lots of stakeholders and lots of interests.
Perfect segue to Toronto and the waterfront.
That's exactly what I was going to say, because I did that for 3 years and I was one of the last holdouts from the original crew that was hired. It was a very, very tough, as you can imagine, environment to work in. And I reached the point where I too was ready to leave. And my wife is from Canada and she said, why don't you look for a job in Toronto? So I started looking, and very shortly after I began, I heard about the role at Waterfront Toronto. And I met with the leadership there, and I thought, wow, this is actually exactly like what I've been doing on the World Trade Center site. It's an organization with a broad mandate, because Lower Manhattan Development Corporation was overseeing not just the Trade Center, but the revitalization of downtown,
Yeah.
and had money but no land ownership. And so Waterfront Toronto is largely the same. Government funding. We don't own the land, as Vic said. They are one of the primary landowners. There are others as well, and having to work with those stakeholders to come up with a plan that people can get behind and get excited about. Waterfront Toronto was, created to bring the 3 levels of government together. The challenges down here are big, and really require that level of collaboration. The flood protection of the Don River, a very expensive project.
Very expensive.
And it really took all 3 levels contributing, because the project does have city, provincial, and national significance in many ways. It is essentially flood protected now. I'm happy to say we opened Badasagay Park 2 weeks ago. Very successful opening, lots of people using it, and that flood protection unlocks all of that land that Vic was talking about, so that it can now be put to a much better, more productive use for the city to address some of our pressing problems. And that's what Waterfront Toronto is trying to do.
It's interesting when you think back over when you came here. I remember when I was involved, there was all about Quayside, the notion of a kind of technology hub on the east side. Tell me a bit about how it shifted away from what was really the focal point, which was a kind of technology hub.
Well, I think the technology hub was certainly an interesting and compelling idea. There had been discussions about some sort of convergence center in the Portlands from when I first arrived here in 2005, so already 10 years before. So there was a history of wanting that. Waterfront Toronto installed one of the first ultra broadband lines in the city that serves multiple buildings down here. And so I think it kind of made some sense. I don't think anyone anticipated the sort of backlash around privacy that the Sidewalk Labs proposal involved. But I think we got a lot out of that, in the sense that I think it helped us push the envelope and raise the bar for that site. And I think the team that we now have, which is Quayside Impact Limited Partners, which is Dream and Great Gulf, they're delivering on a lot of the other components of that. So it's a very ambitious program for housing, very ambitious program for affordable housing. I think they brought on some remarkable architects to do some wonderful design, to create some great spaces, and hopefully create some of the animation uses. So Block 5 in the Quayside site was something we decided to try to hold aside for an anchor kind of destination use, cultural venue of some sort. And I'm pretty optimistic that we're going to figure that out. We've got to slow down in the market, so it may not happen as quickly as we were hoping, but I still think the pieces are the right pieces to deliver something great on that site. And we will have innovation. It may not look exactly like the Sidewalk Labs version of innovation, but there will be innovation. There will be sustainability.
Can I add a thought to that, Giles? I think what the learning for me, certainly, and I think this is what's really important about sort of any vision for the waterfront, is intentionality, right? Like, I think the success of this incredible untapped area, both at where Quayside is located, that 12 acres, but also obviously the rest of the Portlands. And I do applaud the work that Waterfront Toronto has done, because I think that the key to success of these neighborhoods, first of all, we are all trying to build now mixed use communities, right? So we know that we need communities where people can live, work, and play. And what I think Waterfront Toronto has done in their sort of design elements and their thoughtfulness is, I think that the idea of Quayside was, I think we needed to put a stake in the ground and stand for something. And in that case, it was, let's be the home for these innovative technology ideas that help us think about creating smarter cities and how we live, and how we learn from that and do more efficient things. I think you don't know, you don't learn if you don't try, right? We learn more from failure than from success. But I think if you think about both from a destination standpoint, right? I mean, what has been delivered to date there is going to draw people from all over the city, if not from, tourists from abroad. And I think, that is the key, is to build with intention or to design with intention and then be very ambitious. And I think that's really the way we look at these locations, right? And I think that's what the government will buy into.
What I think is important about it, and I mentioned this earlier, is the pieces need to fit together. And we did at the Board of Trade, we did a study on the waterfront called the Ripple Effect, and really the core of that was what we're looking for, what we'd like to see, and what we think we're seeing in the Waterfront Toronto plan is not either or, but and. So, for example, we do see, to use words Vic just used, live, work, and play, all of those elements on the waterfront. I want to focus a little bit on the work side of it, because I often feel that, and again, we're a business organization and we're somewhat worried about shrinking employment lands in the GTA. So as the population expands, where are people going to work? Now we got a huge severe housing shortage. We know that.
Yeah.
But as we build those houses, we need people to have a place to work. And it can't be in sandwich shops and in hotels and so on. It needs to be way beyond that. We need light manufacturing. We need some of those well-paying jobs in tech and so on. Then we need the employment lands available. So let's go back to the waterfront. Do we think we have enough there for a vibrant employment opportunity set for the people, the 100,000 people who may well be living, in this stretch of Toronto?
It's a great question. And I think one of the, I'm going to call it the elephant in the room, is actually the Unilever site. Because ever since that proposal came along, that was being characterized as a major kind of back office space, 10, 12 million square feet of office space.
And you're going back like 5 or 6
Yes,
years.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And so I think that affected everyone's thinking to say, well, that's kind of where the office is going to be. So we'll pick up the housing piece and they will pick up the office piece and it will all work together. Plans are evolving over there. And I think, our thinking is evolving here. But the piece we obviously need, which you're very keenly aware of because you talk about it, is the transit piece.
Yeah.
And so without that commitment, it is also hard to think about bringing a lot of employment down here. But I'm going to kick this one to Vic, because I've said this to you before, Vic. We have the film studios, and it's not talked about enough, and it's a great employment center, and a great industry.
Absolutely. I mean, I think Chris is making a great point. The work that I think Waterfront Toronto is primarily focused on today and is leading in Oakland and Minising, is very much focused, I think, of course, because of the flood protection, on the just big, ambitious public realm. Of course, the housing will follow. There'll be some employment. We know that the employment will take some time. But if we think about the broader precincts, there's Southport, which is another precinct south of the Ship Channel, where we actually manage on behalf of the city about 80 tenants, generate significant revenue. These are light manufacturing, some just storage businesses, but light manufacturing, industrial uses, very important uses, employers that love being there because they're in close proximity, logistics businesses, close proximity to downtown. That is all zoned for that employment use.
So
and
the scope for growth there.
The scope for growth there. And then, as Chris said, in the film industry, I memean, that's a place where, again, we've really put a flag in the ground on the film industry. It's an important sector for Toronto, very, very important. We have, a 34-acre studio already there with Pinewood, one of the leading developers of studios. We have another one that's coming on stream shortly on another piece of land. We have a third studio that fronts onto Lakeshore. So, there is employment there. We need to do more. I think we need to do, as the neighborhood develops and transit gets there, we need to start to converge more of the sectors there. So in other words, more office and more lighter commercial. But we're absolutely committed to it. And, again, Waterfront Toronto is a great partner in that respect because they understand the importance of it as well.
Right. One of the things we haven't talked a bit about, but on the transit side, is East Harbour, right? We're talking about a significant transit hub at East Harbour, which I think will be second only to Union Station as a transit hub in the city. So, and it'll be the convergence of the GO lines and Ontario line and so on. So, and hopefully the LRT.
The LRT line,
So,
yes.
That's
so that would make it, that would really, it seems to me, be a game changer for this whole stretch of land, because all the opportunities will become unlocked, I think, with that kind of access
Yeah.
to transit. Now we're probably, 7 or 8 years away, maybe 10 years away from the complete vision of all of that. But ground's been broken on East Harbour, so that's
Yep.
on that station. So that's pretty exciting as a development in and of itself.
Yeah. And I think as that transit becomes real, everything has been zoned for mixed use. So there is the potential to start to shift the mix.
Right.
It's been, for reasons I mentioned, a bit more tilted towards residential, but it doesn't have to stay that way as we evolve, as the market evolves, as there's pressure and interest in commercial. We can bring commercial uses down here, like this one that we're sitting in was, a vacant lot and now has
Absolutely.
an office building on it. So it's definitely possible. And I think complements some of the other things Vic was talking about, some of the creative industries that we know are going to be part of our economy, or we hope continue to be part of our economy. For
and when you think about industry down here, I mean, it's funny, when we moved in here, a number of people said, well, when do you think Redpath is going to be moving along? Because it blocks your view. I said, I hope never.
never.
Like, this is a hugely important company for the confectionery industry, the food industry in Southern Ontario, where the sugar comes from Redpath's right here.
Yeah.
It's a really important asset, and I hope it never leaves. And to me, it's also one thing I was going to say from a tourism perspective. I'm always watching when the ships come in with the sugar from the Caribbean. All the tourists stand and watch, the unloading. It's a great thing to see. It's real stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's not just some kind of Disney experience, entertainment experience. It's a real experience.
It's authentic. Yeah.
It's authentic.
Well,
and so
it if I can jump in, Giles, it leads to this idea that I think that we are very focused and intentional on in the Portlands, which is that we really do need to appreciate that we can coexist with industry and heavy industry. And I think there are lessons to be learned from Europe, where they have no choice, right? Geography is scarce.
strong them all together.
Yeah, you can sip a nice Chardonnay in Rotterdam while a container ship is being unloaded 50 meters away. And it's not unusual. In fact, it's something to see.
Well, you see that in Halifax as well,
That's right.
interestingly, right where the port
right.
is,
Yeah.
same kinds of things.
Yeah, I mean, we built a park called Leslie Lookout Park on Leslie Street, just towards the gateway to Tommy Thompson Park, and it sits between Lafarge and Strata Aggregates. And so, that was tough. And, of course, the industry didn't like it at first, but we did our best. We were committed to it. We've worked with them. We've had no complaints. It's been a year now. And in fact, some of the employees, come and enjoy lunch now,
Well, I was
right?
going to say,
so
it's kind of an
you have
interesting.
to remember, there are real people working in these jobs, right? In these industries.
Well, that's
So-
right, and then, and again, I mean, the cement complex there is hugely important.
It's hugely important.
For the construction all across the GTA.
Up our city.
You think of the number of trucks that are not on the road because you've got the ships coming in. I want to come back to the whole question of vision, though. We've talked about many of the elements. We haven't talked about the port itself, but let's just move along to the vision, because we've had experts from Sydney, Australia, and other ports around the world come and talk about what they've got versus what we have. And what it turned out that many of these great cities have actually still got a bit of a problem with this sort of disjointed nature of their port, right? Their portland, that it's or their waterfront, where it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and it doesn't really hang together that well. Even the last expert we had in from Sydney said, it's not quite as gelled as you think it is.
Yeah.
But here's an opportunity to have a more gelled vision for our waterfront, learning from other experiences. But talk a little bit about vision and how the pieces fit together from west to east.
Well, I think the vision has always been to make this a really special waterfront. And we have been looking at some of those other cities from around the world and said, this could be one of the greatest waterfronts. It's a good waterfront, but it's not at the level of the truly great ones. But I think we have all the bones. We have a great harbor. We've got, great land. We've got the beginnings of a great park network. We're lacking some of the other things that would make it great. Certainly destinations are one of those, and that's a piece we're working on now with our destination study to look at how can we bring more people here, large numbers of people. We have focused a lot in the past on outdoor activities, places like Harbourfront, which are mostly seasonal, and they're wonderful places. We need the things that are here year round so that we can have the rest of that ecosystem that relies on customers year
Well,
round.
the interior place redevelopment, I mean, I'll be honest, I mean, at the board, we're big fans of that. I mean, we thought it was long overdue. Governments over the last 20 years have been looking for some way to modernize and replace what was really getting pretty old and shabby with something that would be dramatic and new and attract a lot of visitors to the waterfront. And, I think there may be different views about the Therma project, but to me, it is a kind of modern version of what we had. And you add together, the science center. Wow, now you've got two attractions on the waterfront that are like anchors.
That's
When
right.
you go along, and you've got, others as you go along, but it starts to hang together better, it seems to me.
Yeah, you need those clusters, and you need them at different locations. And I think Ontario Place will be one of those big clusters.
Yeah.
I think the Science Center is going to be a great boon to the waterfront. And if we can build something like that on the east side, we have most of the pieces we need to stitch
What do
it
you
together.
think of what would be, in your sense, something similar to that on the east side?
Well, I keep wondering, we have so many great arts institutions in this city, but none of them are down on the waterfront.
Right.
And many of them have very large collections, the majority of which sit in storage. Could we create some
Like the
sort of a share?
AGO
Yes,
or-
the AGO, the ROM.
Yeah.
Could we create some sort of a satellite facility here that brings some of their material down? And could it even partner with some great institutions from around the world? So Amsterdam did this with the Heart Museum. It was a partnership between a local institution and the Hermitage in Russia. After Ukraine war, they shifted it, and it's now a partnership with Pompidou and the National Art Gallery
really?
of
Okay.
Britain.
Yeah.
Could we do something like that where we can have cultural exchange with some of our stuff that's great? The ROM is world class. It could partner with any of those institutions
Right.
just as well, and bring a whole bring Canadian culture into contact with those other ones. Could we have a sort of group of 7 museum down here? Because
Yeah.
that's something that people really know about Canada and associate with Canada. You come to Toronto, you can't actually see it. Yes, you can get up to Courtright, and that's fantastic, but could some of that be down here?
Right.
Like, I think our own Canadian identity could be so much more expressed on this waterfront, and this seems like the right time to
Yeah.
do that with everything happening
Yeah,
south of the
yeah,
border.
yeah.
Like, so I think that's kind of the
Is
vision.
there
Like,
land is there land set aside for something like that? Institution.
There's lots.
there's lots of land, right? I mean, we have
Yeah,
our
yeah,
flag.
there's
Yeah.
lots
And
of
then on Aquaman Menacing, Vic knows this, we have lots of development blocks that can have residential, but they have big footprints. They
Yeah,
could have
so
a big
it's
institution on the
flexible.
ground floor. Yeah.
It's flexible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would add, I think, Giles, just, the one thing that we, I think, need to do is try to create connectivity between all of these different aspects of the 10-kilometer waterfront as part of the vision of it. And, I think we're, whether you support Therme or not, I think what we're seeing now, and I think there's sort of a recognition that we need destinations to bring people down, but we also need a waterfront that serves everybody. So there has to be free and public programming that's accessible to all. And I think we can't forget what sort of made the waterfront dynamic 25 years ago, when some of us might have been coming down here at a younger age, which is the central waterfront, the Harbourfront Center, and support for that. Right. So I think, that's feeling a little tired. And I think, the Harbourfront Center needs.
But I'm sensing a bit of new energy there too, though.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
it
Absolutely.
feels-
Well, listen,
yeah.
and like hats off to the board, because bringing that group of all of us together as CEOs of organizations that have an interest in the waterfront, all agencies of some form or another, a few private companies as well. That takes a lot of effort. I mean, I think we're at a point in time now where organizations that wouldn't have sat at the same table together are now together. And
Yeah, it
there's a
seems like you're
desire.
gelling a bit. This is
Absolutely,
great.
right.
Yeah, I feel
Yeah.
that too.
This is a great conversation, but I wanted to get back to the mobility piece. How can we use marine more effectively here to take the pressure off the road? I'll start with you, Chris.
Okay, well, I think I'll talk about the marine transportation because we are working to pilot a east-west water taxi service, which we see as a step towards creating a sea bus system that could run in a circuit around the harbor and start to connect up better all of these different existing and emerging destinations. We just opened Badasagay Park. It's not served by a streetcar yet, but it could easily be served by a water taxi and by a sea bus. So we could start to bring large numbers of people there, not with their cars, and in advance of the transit. And that circuit could connect up with that hovercraft stop.
Yeah.
So you could start to bring people in from farther away. They could transfer onto a water taxi and suddenly have access to the whole harbor quite quite vast without dealing with, the traffic concerns that we all know happen here. So I see that as an exciting piece. And, I do think Therm and the Science Center, there's going to be a huge critical mass of people there. Let's get those folks out here.
Yeah.
Padassegay Park is actually a great place to learn about science because it's all about flood management. And imagine the Science Center being able to do programming over there and take their students on a little boat, on a water taxi, and run them right over there and do a program and go back. Like, that would just be so exciting for the harbor, great for them as an organization, great for our two organizations. So I think there's a huge amount of potential via connections to make this.
Open up marine, basically, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I would just agree with that. And it's great to see the Waterfront Toronto. When I saw the presentation, I think actually here, at Port Giles, I thought this is just brilliant. Like, the idea of a C-bus route is just like it would become, I think, one of the top tourist attractions. Like, it's
the city from the water.
Such an automatic, right?
Yeah.
So I think, that's great.
Yeah.
I think that we do need to take advantage of more commuting opportunities using the water. I just want to talk for a minute, though, about your first point, which I think we play a role in at CreateTO.
That's why,
And, we're not responsible for the port traffic. The Port Authority is that. But again, they're another partner of ours in the port. We have land protected for port uses, right? Many of our tenants are those very businesses that rely on the port. And so we're improving the dock wall.
You are? Okay,
investing.
great.
Absolutely. We have a long-term program to do that. We have awareness now by the city that this is an important city public asset that needs to be maintained. And so we're going to embark on that program. But that land is not going anywhere. It's designated for those uses, and we hope they can be maximized. We want to see innovation as well, though.
Well,
right? We don't want people to just spread out. Like,
No.
we want them to be innovative. Let's maximize, again, the utility of those.
Well, I think there is an
those
opportunity
pieces
for
of
more concentrated
Absolutely.
approach, right? People look at Chicago and they'll say there's, I don't know how many, like 40 kilometers of, of employment lands that can be used, and they have a huge advantage over Toronto. But I agree with you. I think, a more effective use of the land we do have, but let's make sure it is used for that.
Absolutely.
I think there's huge economic opportunity there.
Absolutely.
Okay. That's all the time we have, but thank you for a great conversation.
Thank you. This has been great.
Enjoyed it.
Yeah, a lot of
And,
fun.
Well, there's a lot happening.
Yeah.
And it's always nice to talk about great opportunities, and I think that's what we have here. So.
And you guys are doing a great job. So anytime you want us back, we'd be happy to reprise this and talk about anything you want, Giles.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, we'll do it again
Yeah.
for sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's all for this episode of Toronto Talks. Don't forget to join us on September 29th for our annual Waterfront Symposium. It's a perfect place to connect with leaders like Vic and Chris. Visit bot.com to get your tickets. The event will sell out. Until next time, Toronto, keep talking. Our voice drives meaningful change.